We got a lot to talk about today and a really great topic. So welcome everyone to episode 21 of Baseline Tech Talk Tuesday. And if you're joining us for the first time, and I know some of you are because I saw some new registrations, thank you for joining us. And you can find all the previous replays on YouTube. Search for the Baseline YouTube handle, which is Baseline Web Training. That's all one word on YouTube. And you can find all season 1 and season 2 of Baseline Tech Talk Tuesday. And you might also see some helpful training videos that Dan's been producing. And with that in mind, if you do need support or you want help learning how to do something, program something, we do encourage you to take a look at YouTube and you might find what you're looking for now that we have a good amount of videos available. So the topic for today is soil moisture sensors and the new EPA WaterSense soil moisture sensor labeling program. And before we kick it off, Chris is going to take us today, but I want to do our usual introductions. I'm Andy Humphrey, irrigation technology consultant for Baseline. We have Dan Conger, our training manager, and Chris Wright, our VP of sales.
Good day.
And both Chris and I have been, quote unquote, bringing this technology to market for a very long time. And so we wanted to hand this over to Chris. He's got a lot of experience with this program with soil moisture sensors. So with that, Chris, lead us off.
Awesome. Very good. Thank you for the intro, Andy. So we are very excited around the Baseline organization and HydroPoint as a whole because of the recent labeling of the soil moisture sensor technology with the EPA WaterSense labeling. And I think, the thing that we need to emphasize first and foremost is that this was a very long time coming. So I've got a bit of a timeline that illustrates how long we've been working on this. As many of you know, weather-based irrigation controllers received EPA WaterSense labeling more than a decade ago. And have been utilized in many parts of the country as part of, rebate programs with water districts, part of specification, requirements for lead projects and the like. And while we've been able to take advantage of some of that on the Baseline side, we were excluded from quite a bit of it because of the soil moisture sensor based technology that we bring to market. So with the recent labeling, it makes it or positions the product in market in a perfect place to deal with drought restrictions that we are faced with here in the West, and just to promote higher efficiency irrigation practices nationwide, regardless of your water situation. So today we want to highlight that. We want to create some excitement around it. Because the program's been around for so long, maybe some of the excitement has been taken out of it as of late. But I think this is a great opportunity to reprise the program. Make some noise about it in market and educate users on how to use the technology to be more efficient in their landscapes.
Yep.
So to start with, let's just kind of give you some background of the program and where it came from. I'm assuming you can see my screen.
Right on. We gotcha.
Perfect. All right. So Baseline is the first manufacturer to receive approval in the EPA WaterSense category for soil moisture based irrigation controllers. And we are the only irrigation controller manufacturer to be EPA certified for both soil moisture sensing and weather-based automation as well. So we're able to add some additional credibility to our technology and what we're able to do with it with those certifications. And we definitely want to teach you as a user how to use it so that you can get the benefits of that. So let's look at the timeline associated with this process, just to give you a little bit of background. The WaterSense labeling is a voluntary EPA program that was launched in 2006. It started with products like toilets and faucets and things that were indoor related, and eventually made it to outdoor landscape irrigation with irrigation controllers and then spray bodies, rain clicks, things like that. But basically, the WaterSense labeling is reserved for products that are independently certified for water efficiency and performance. And the label is reserved for products that reduce water use by at least 20% and perform as well or better than standard models. Okay.
Yeah, and Chris, when we were talking pre-show, I found that as a good reminder because I hadn't taken the time to really understand or remember what that number is. And I think it's a good statement for all of us to remember if somebody asks us, what is the WaterSense program? To just remember that 20%. That the goal that EPA set was a 20% number. And I think it's a great thing for us just to keep top of mind. So when we're out there in the world doing what we do, we know what and why we're doing it.
Absolutely. So if we do remember that 20%, right? So living in Utah, we're under an exceptional drought scenario right now. The state of Utah is, declared a state of emergency, blah, blah, blah. And they are asking for a 20% reduction in water use for, landscape applications. So it's all over the news. Just because a WaterSense labeled product says that it is 20% more efficient than a comparative standard model, does that mean that we're going to get 20% water savings with it?
Yeah, probably not.
This isn't as easy as that Staples Easy button because somebody still has to push the button. The user is involved.
I think the point is that if it's applied correctly, right, and it's understood how it works, then there is the potential for having 20% or more water savings associated with using the product. For sure.
Potential. That's a great way to say it.
Yeah. So as we look at what the background was for the testing protocol to get the labeling, it's just, interesting to look at the timeline as to, what was the catalyst for this and why, and then what the, establishment of that testing protocol looked like. So basically, with these smart water technology products, they're looking to, follow more the ET curve that occurs seasonally based on plant water requirement, based on environmental factors, right? So this is a very simple graph that shows that ET curve and what the water requirements would be through the hotter times of the month or the year, and then the typical, level at which property owners irrigate at, and the potential savings that exist there by reducing the amount of overwatering in the spring and fall seasons.
And this should look very familiar to everyone here, right? This is something that has been talked about for probably decades, but more recently, at least 10 to 15 years with ET-based controllers. And we should have all seen this a lot and understand what the seasonal ET curve looks like.
Yeah. And this is very elementary and very simplified because we know that the plant water requirement for different species of plants are going to be different at different times of the year. For instance, turf grass actually has a lower water requirement in the hotter period of the summer because they're not putting on root growth or they're not storing energy for winter survival. And trees will require more water as they're leafing out and establishing their canopy as opposed to once they're established. So there is fluctuations to this curve, based on plant type or species, which is important, but this is just very simplified illustration of that. All right, so when they started looking at the different technologies, they identified two types of technologies, one being a bypass technology and the other being an on-demand technology. So what would you consider or think would be a bypass technology, Mr. Conger?
Like a rain interrupt switch would probably be a bypass.
Okay, yep, so an add-on device to an existing controller, right?
It breaks the common.
Yep, exactly. So in this case, a product that Baseline does have that would fit the bypass technology category would be the S100, right? Add-on device to an existing controller, interrupts the common, doesn't allow that irrigation cycle to happen, saving that water that would have normally been applied. That's different than on-demand technologies. On-demand technologies require that a sensor be connected to a controller, and then that controller will read the sensor data and will respond based on a low threshold or a high threshold to initiate a start or a stop condition, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. So not as common as bypass technologies, typically, reserved for larger irrigation systems, but this would be the 5315B soil moisture sensor working with a 3200 or a 1000 controller.
Yeah. And what's interesting about when you think of the term on demand, literally just that. In theory, on demand puts start times, start days, it puts it to the side. If you really want on demand, it says, hey, I'm dry right now, let's water, go. I've had enough, I'm full, let's stop. That is truly on demand.
So to have truly on demand, what is required in order to achieve that?
You need to have a start, stop, or pause condition. And you need really a start and stop.
You need real-time data from that sensor device, correct?
Yep. And then the bypass relies on the existing programming that's in the controller, and it just either allows it or disallows it. That's it.
Yep.
It seems like a bypass is a simpler technology, and on demand would be more sophisticated and a lot more involved to make that happen.
Yep. But both very effective, right? Yep. Measuring what the moisture content is in the landscape and then allowing or not allowing irrigation to happen. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So, with those considerations in the early days, WaterSense was interested in soil moisture sensor technology as an alternative to weather-based irrigation controllers. And in 2013, they decided to get formal about it, formed a committee, and started to develop the testing protocol. So June 2013 corresponds to June 2021. So this is a process that has been 8 years in the making, correct? Did I do the math correct?
Yeah. And it's just funny to think back to the early days when WeatherBase got their labeling and certification, and we're kind of sitting there like, hey guys, we have this device, we're ready, we can do something here, and we just had to basically wait our turn, stand in line, wait our turn until we are where we are now.
Yep, for sure. So when they started the process, they limited the scope to bypass technologies. And then in the process, they expanded it to on-demand technologies too. So the point being, Baseline's been involved in this from the very beginning, first with the S100 product and then evolving into the 5315B soil moisture sensor technology as well. Okay, so through all that process, ultimately we come down to the point where Baseline receives EPA WaterSense labeling. All right, so Yahoo, what does that mean? What does that mean to design? What does that mean to, water managers and users and property owners? And how can we implement that technology and use it effectively to achieve that 20% more or more water savings that adheres to the labeling protocol.
Yeah, and something that comes to mind that we sort of competed against is there are oftentimes funding is available for products that have the labeling. So municipal or rebate type products, has been funding available for WaterSense labeled that initially we could not participate in until we rolled out our weather-based product to simply meet that requirement to get the label. And what's really exciting about this is now the quote unquote tracks are being laid for soil moisture sensors so that users who have preference or a desire to use sensors can now obtain the labeling, which might unlock funding resources to them as well. It's just as one, aspect that comes to mind.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm sure, Mr. Conger, you recall the days in Southern California where they were doing drive-through controller exchanges for weather-based controllers.
Yes. Right. You could get a rebate and essentially get a controller for free, and contractor sales were booming because it was a very little cost, if no cost, to the property owner.
Yeah.
And not always there's other ways to do that, but sometimes we would see the bypass technology bypassed, if you will.
Yeah.
Because they just installed it.
Yeah. So Chris, I think we should maybe chat briefly about our conversation with Tim Hickenlooper yesterday, who is one of the founders of Baseline and worked on this particular program himself. One of the things that I took away from our conversation with Tim is that the certification of the sensors was not about can the sensor exactly measure volumetric moisture. It wasn't about the number and whose sensor is scientifically measuring this number. It really evolved into, is this sensor reliable and repeatable over time? So when it does read this number, it's the same moisture percentage today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, and in 5 years, was more important than what is the exact volumetric percentage of this soil.
Which, if you read the testing protocol, they were very interested in the very onset of the testing, right? They wanted to know what the volumetric moisture content was of the soil, 3 different types of soils at 3 different salinities, right? So they were approaching it very scientifically, and you read the document and it reads like a technical, engineering document. And I think the beauty of it is the way that you apply this technology. It doesn't have to be complicated, and it's easy to overthink it. But in reality, we're wanting to measure if there's moisture in that soil profile, and we want to know when it dries down to a certain level that would initiate or allow an irrigation cycle to happen, right? So is there a standard in the industry as to where that threshold is, Andy? Or
there's
Dan?
rules of thumbs, but it's up to the user. I mean, the user gets to decide how dry they want their landscape to be. They get to decide and determine based on the plant health, the time of year, et cetera, how dry they want. We can, in theory, and we can, when we do measure field capacity, and you can see it on our graphs, and we can look at that on yours here in a minute. But the dry down is the user gets to decide how dry.
And to that point, there is a calculation for maximum allowable depletion depending upon your soil type. But the way I'm going to approach it, and the way Andy's going to approach it, and the way someone else that has different repercussions. If my repercussions are water conservation, and the person on site is about having green turf, we have different goals. And to Andy's point, we're going to manage that level different. And I think that setting to that level, having that repeatable level that manager can set it to every time is wonderful. It's a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. And then you take into consideration too, if you're managing a site where you've got some kind of restriction in place or some kind of mandate, and you have to save water, but you also want to preserve the aesthetic value of your landscape, you may be able to adjust across the site using different sensor technology in different places to manage where you let stress and where you want to keep more, true to aesthetic.
Yeah. That's actually a really good. The areas that are non-focal, let's say, or less value, you can set that threshold lower. Or if you're watering into the upper threshold, you can lower the upper threshold, and you can dial in and keep those focal areas as green as you want them to be, and use different levels in different areas.
Definitely. Yep. And it's all based on the opinion or the desire of whoever's managing the water on the site, right? Or managing the landscape. Absolutely. So a little easier to do that with a soil moisture sensor across a single site than it would be with a weather-based system that's accounting for the weather for the whole site rather than, those hydro zones.
Yeah. And again, it's the nice thing with the sensor is it's real information. So it knows what happened when that zone watered, right? Because if it was very windy and the water was just blowing in the breeze in that zone, the sensor's not going to sense the moisture. Yet a weather-based system does not know that moisture did not reach, the sensor level. So it's real-time data. And once you start to grasp that and you start to use it, for me, the moment that's been time now, but there was like a light bulb moment where you're like, wow, I understand this. I know if I test this sensor, exactly what that means on this site.
Definitely. All right. So should we take a look at graph?
Yeah.
And see how it works and why it's important? Beautiful. All right. So I'm actually rather proud of this because this is my moisture graph out of my turf grass.
And look at the date. This is real time. This is right real now.
Time. So this is happening right now. So it's been very hot and dry in Salt Lake City. My daily ET values have been north of 0.40. And I'm managing irrigation cycles to adhere to what they're recommending on the news and in public outreach to conserve water. And the message that they're relaying is that you need to prioritize your trees, then prioritize your perennials, and your last priority should be your turf grass. And let your turf grass, yellow out.
Go to sleep.
Because that's going to indicate that you're conserving water in your landscape, is that your turf grass is yellow, right?
Oh, interesting.
Fascinating. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're, recommending watering 3 days a week right now, which should be a normal agronomic practice anyway, and to operate rotor type sprinklers for 40 minutes, right? Now, before they came out with the 40 minutes, I already had my runtime based on 40 minutes. But it's interesting to see the behavior of the system over, this 2-week period. And then we can look at it in a month period as well.
Because if you didn't know any better, Chris,
right down to that wetting of the soil profile.
You'd think you have a schedule here that's Wednesday, Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, Monday, right? If you didn't know any better, I would think you have a fixed schedule.
In reality, I have an open water window from 7 p.m. to 10 a.m. No start times, no days to water, just an open water window. So anytime
on-demand watering, truly on-demand watering.
So anytime I reach a 25% value in my turf grass, then it initiates an irrigation cycle, and I irrigate for 40 minutes in 2 20-minute cycles, right? And you can see here the total run time with the blue bar, and then the green line is the moisture percentage. And you can see, it's interesting to see the dry down once the heat of the day kicks in. So that curve steepens dramatically, from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Whoops, there we go. We had a 2% change in moisture content, essentially. But it's controlling how frequently I'm irrigating to fill my soil profile or my reservoir back up to a desired limit.
Chris, I'll point out and mention that when you look at this green line, which is the moisture, and you see it drop off like a cliff starting around that 9:30, 10 o'clock a.m. time.
Peak tanning hours.
Yeah. The soil moisture is the results of the weather. It's the effect of the weather. So when the weather goes up or ET times, moisture is the inverse, and it's actually the results that matter. It's what is this weather doing right now to this landscape, to this soil profile. So oftentimes when I'm describing soil moisture technology, since we have all learned about ET and weather, sometimes the easiest way to think about it is the moisture sensor measures the results of the weather, the effect of the weather.
Yep, exactly. And it's interesting to note too, looking at this, if I were to change zones, if I go to a zone that I have operating on, I put it on weather-based watering.
Ooh.
Starting on June 10th. So this is a zone right next to my turf zone that's operating on weather-based rather than on soil moisture. And you can see my varying run times. But if I added all of those run times together, it's watering every day, right? Because ET gets measured every day. So it's going to want to replace moisture that was taken out of the landscape based on a formula. But in reality, there may have been moisture reserved in that soil profile that would allow me to skip.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great. We're going to have to use that as a seed for another episode, because that's really good stuff right there to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you do it in the same zone, it would be, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When I installed my system, I should have broken it up into test plots in the turf, but I didn't. But
yeah.
So
can you go back to that other moisture sensor in the last minutes here and zoom out to a 30-day period?
Yep.
So Andy, while he's doing that, we were seeing that, if everyone could remember that green line on the moisture content, there's a little bit of a lag behind the runtime, where it doesn't immediately spike, and then it spikes up after the runtime. What would you explain what that's from?
That's just from when the data gets reported from the controller back to base manager.
Well, then there's a portion of it too of infiltration, right? So if the heavier the soil, the longer that's going to take for the moisture to penetrate.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. For sure. All right. So there's 1 month, Andy.
That's fantastic. So if I wanted to tell you what your weather was like, right, do this in reverse. I might say something like, just looking at the date there, maybe between May 20th and May 27th, it looks like you had a short rain event and on the 24th. And then it stayed a little bit cooler for a few days until the 27th. You hit your lower threshold. And then it was moderately warm. You were watering every 2 days. And then it got a little warmer because on July 5th to the 7th, it started watering every other day. So your frequency increased. And so we can sort of work backwards. And I could tell you what your weather is based on what your moisture sensor was telling us.
That's brilliant.
Yep. Absolutely. So really cool data. It's not, again, about the instrument itself or the hardware. It's about the data that you get from it and what you're able to do with that data to adjust performance of your system, either to dial it in for high performance and great aesthetic value, or to adjust it to adhere to any kind of, restriction or mandate that may be imposed upon you to save water.
Yep. And that's our job. We want to educate you to become better users, to understand how this technology works in order to make it work better and make it work for you. I think you can get behind the wheel of a sports car and just drive it down the road, or you can get behind the wheel of a sports car and know how to really drive it. And that's what we want you to do, is use these tools and really know how to use it to your advantage.
Absolutely. All right. So we blew through 30 minutes that quickly. So always amazes me how fast time goes. But again, we just wanted to share with everybody our excitement about the EPA WaterSense labeling associated with the baseline soil moisture sensors, and create some interest in your mind as to how you can use that technology to be a better irrigator.
Mm-hmm.
Be wicked smart.
Wicked
Smart irrigator. So, all right, we're at the bottom of the hour. What do we got on tap for next week?
Baseline 2-wire. What's unique about it? We're going to kind of build on this whole sensor concept and not talk about the wire path itself, but the system itself.
And the devices attached to it.
Exactly.
The data gathering purposes.
What you can do with it. Oh, yeah. Data.
Awesome. All right, guys.
All right.
Well, go out, stay cool, work hard. If you need anything, let us know, and we will see you next week.
Yep. See you guys.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Take time. Bye-bye.